demolishing the homes of those?
We make sure that people will understand that they need to pay a price for terrorism, because at the moment the only price they're getting is rewards from the Palestinian Authority.
My question is it the whole family's responsibility?
We're saying again, this is not a punishment for the family. It's actually,
it is if you're bulldozing their house down.
Because you need to take responsibility for the fact that your Palestinian Authority is actually giving you this motivation to go and kill innocent Jews in the streets. I mean, this is a pure anti-Semitism. Think about it. If someone would have taken a gun here in London, would have shot Jews just because they're Jews, the whole country would have been in headlines saying, this is horrific, this is anti-Semitism. In Israel, in some very strange way, people are saying, no, well, you need to understand the circumstances. Nothing can justify hurting innocent people. And this is what's happening in our streets.
On both sides, I suppose, is what Anthony
But again, we don't hurt
saying.
Innocent people.
Well, as I just pointed out to you, there was
we don't target innocent people.
At a checkpoint, and he was unarmed in front of his child, demolishing the home.
هكذا يتم نقل الأطفال الخدج من قسم الحضانة لمجمع الشباب الطبي إلى ناحية حيث تتوفر بعض الكهرباء.
حسبنا الله عليك يا إسرائيل.
هنا في قسم العمليات في مكان غير مناسب كما ترون، يتم جمع الأطفال الخدج على أسرة واحدة خشية من أن يفقدوا حياتهم بعد يعني قرب أو نفاذ الكهرباء وتوقف الأكسجين في الحضانة. فالآن يتم نقلهم على أمل أن يتم نقلهم في ظروف مواتية، إن شاء الله تكون ظروف مواتية يعني في خارج مجمع الشباب. هؤلاء الأصل أن يكون كل رضيع منهم على جهاز خاص به، على حضانة خاصة به، ولكن للأسف كما ترون هذا هو حال الرضع الخدج في قطاع غزة. هذا حال هكذا. هؤلاء الأطفال هم الأضعف مناعة، هم الأكثر عرضة للموت في ظل التجهيزات الطبية الكبيرة، فما بالكم حينما يتم وضعهم بهذه الصورة. ولكن هكذا حكمت الظروف.
فقدنا 3، وإذا استمر الحال على ما هو عليه سنفقد الباقي هؤلاء الأطفال. ظروف غير ملائمة تماما لهؤلاء الأطفال حديثي الولادة ذو الأوزان القليلة جدا. هي صرخة من هؤلاء الأطفال إلى العالم. هذا الطفل مصاب. 4 أطفال من هؤلاء ولدوا بدون أمهات، أمهاتهم توفوا، قد أصيبوا أثناء القصف وتم عمل عملية جراحية قيصرية لهم، وهم الآن أيتام بدون أمهات ولا آباء. حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل.
قسم الأطفال الخدج حاليا خالي من جميع الأطفال الذين به لعدم وجود الكهرباء. نحاول حاليا إبقائهم على قيد الحياة بوسائل بسيطة جدا لكي ندفئهم بالبطانيات وأيضا ببعض الشراشف. الأوضاع لدينا مزرية جدا، انقطاع كامل عن التيار الكهربائي في كافة أنحاء مستشفى الشفاء، وهي أكبر مستشفى في قطاع غزة.
What's the view on the humanitarian crisis in Gaza this morning?
Well, there is no humanitarian crisis because there is no. Israel is in charge of the safety of the Israelis. Hamas is in charge of the safety of the Palestinians. Hamas abused every single support of the international community, and instead of taking care of his people, it created this underneath tunnel of terror, a manufacturing of rockets that their own main target is to hurt innocent Jews in their homes. And this is the time that Hamas need to pay the price.
The International Criminal Court defines the crime of genocide as the specific intent to destroy in whole or in part a specific national, ethnic, religious or racial group by killing its members or by other means. Now keep that definition in mind. Apparently, the hardest part of proving a genocide is the intent to commit genocide. But in Israel's current ongoing onslaught on Palestinians in Gaza, many believe Israel's intentions against a particular group, in this case the Palestinians in Gaza, have been clearly stated and are on public record. But how are they able to get away with or justify any of their actions? We're seeing evidence of Israel's crimes against Palestinians in real time, possibly in a way that we never have before. And yet, Israel continues to try to hide or lie about its crimes. Israeli airstrikes on Gaza have killed or wounded Palestinians at a rate of 1 person a minute. And with a child death toll so high that 1 Palestinian child is killed every 10 minutes. With the evidence of what Israel has done so far, matched up with what Israeli officials and soldiers said they intend to do,
we will bomb Shifa Hospital, all the hospitals, all the tunnels, and kill them all. It's about time. The world knows that. There's no argue about that.
הציפייה שלך שהיינו מטילים מה שנקרא איזושהי פצצת אטום על כל עזה, משטחים אותה, מחסלים את כל מי שנמצא בה.
Some human rights experts and officials are now explicitly saying what Israel is doing in Gaza is genocide.
I feel quite confident as a human rights lawyer in saying that what I see unfolding in Gaza and beyond is genocide.
So how does Israel justify or get away with any of this? And there's many answers to this question. Despite what Israeli officials keep repeating about minimizing or avoiding civilian deaths, the death tolls with stated intentions suggest otherwise. And just to go back to where that intent may come from, Israeli journalist and author Gideon Levy explains a set of principles that allow Israelis to live in peace with the occupation and anything that might come about from it.
But the third set of values is the most dangerous one. And this is the systematic dehumanization of the Palestinians, which enable us, Israelis, to live in peace with everything. Because if they are not human beings like us, then there is not really a question of human rights. And if you scratch under the skin of almost every Israeli, you will find it there. Almost no one will treat the Palestinians as equal human beings like us.
And this, coupled with the unwavering support given to Israel by some Western governments who have said that there are no red lines for Israel.
The administration is not drawing any red lines for Israel. As the death toll for civilians in the Gaza Strip has gone up, I wanted to ensure, is that still the case, that the administration has no red lines?
That is still the case.
Israel is therefore able to continue what many believe is a genocidal campaign of attacking and starving Palestinians in Gaza. And you may ask why the international community, and in particular some Western governments, will completely avoid using the term genocide.
That if a government says genocide has happened, then it is obliged, if it's ratified the convention under Article 1, to take steps. So governments almost never say genocide has happened.
Is all the members of the family who were killed.
These are all your members of your family?
Of the family on the 7th. They became piles, their bodies. This is my niece who was killed. This is her body. This my niece who was engineering, graduated. She was found under the rubble. This is my niece, she is a medical doctor. She was supposed to start her specialty. This, my cousin, this is my nephew, who is a physiotherapist, and he was killed. This is my niece's daughter. And that's what we want to see. These people, they have names. They have faces. And that's what is needed. This is my daughter Bisan, who was killed 16th of January 2009, who said, to meet violence with violence doesn't solve any problem. There is an alternative way. It's not by action and reaction. It's by being a human and behaving and thinking of others. This is Mayar and Aya. Even my niece, she named her daughter Aya after my daughter. Aya was killed.
And to be safe,
also.
Israelis worked with the international organizations to make sure all Palestinian civilians will be safe. And we are giving them the opportunity to go south to sheltered places that they will be safe. Unfortunately, the children of Kfar Aza, the people of Sderot, were not given this opportunity to be safe. They weren't alarmed. They didn't get alert They were slaughtered in their beds. So Israel is just targeting military targets, and we want the international community to make sure Hamas will bring back home all those kidnapped people, including British citizens, by the way. Yesterday, I got a phone call from Israeli citizens that said the mother was shot and the two teenager girls, 13 and 16, are kept hostage in Gaza, British citizens.
We've been showing pictures this morning that would illustrate that there is a humanitarian crisis in Gaza.
Can I ask you something?
Yeah.
Are you a mother?
Yes.
What would you think if your children would have been executed in front of your eyes? Would you expect your government to think about those Nazis committing those crimes and to say, wait a second, first of all, we need to protect the enemy, and then to protect my children? Your children come as priority to your prime minister.
So
do you know that?
We have been showing images this morning that illustrate that there is a humanitarian crisis in Gaza.
So blame Hamas and ask Hamas why they started those atrocities, walking
So
around.
you acknowledge that there is a humanitarian crisis?
I'm saying there is no. Israel is working.
So what do you think is happening?
What is happening? There is a war in Gaza, a war that Hamas started.
Israel are trying to justify their deadly bombardment of Gaza by making some big claims about Hamas. First, they told us Hamas were ISIS, and now they're telling us that they are Nazis. And speaking to the BBC, the Israeli President Isaac Herzog said he had new proof.
I want to show you something exclusive, Laura. So this is Adolf Hitler's book, translated to Arabic, Mein Kampf. It's the book that led to the Holocaust and the book that led to World War II. This is the book that led to his victory in elections in Germany, which led to the worst atrocity of humankind, which the British fought against. Well, this book was found just a few days ago in northern Gaza in a children's living room, which was turned into a military operation base of Hamas on the body of one of the terrorists and murderers of Hamas. And he wrote notes, he marked and learned again and again Adolf Hitler's ideology of hating the Jews, of killing the Jews, of burning the Jews, of slaughtering the Jews. This is the real warrior act. So all those who demonstrated yesterday, I'm not saying that all of them support Hitler, but all I'm saying is by omitting to understand what Hamas ideology is all about, they're basically supporting this ideology.
How very kind of him to concede that not all 500,000 people marching on Saturday in London, sort of concerned, devastated that hundreds of kids are being killed every day by his military. Thank you for him. How generous for him to concede that they're not all Nazis, right? How thoughtful, how reasonable. Of course, Israel has already killed over 4,000 children in Gaza, so the claim this book was found in a children's living room seems to me particularly sinister. Of course, if Gazan children have been reading Mein Kampf, perhaps they, like adults, or like the adults of Gaza, are Nazis too, and therefore fair game for mass slaughter. Of course, they can also say if they do kill some kids, oh, well, kids' bedrooms are now fair game because they're being used by Hamas fighters who, by the way, all have a copy of Mein Kampf on them, right? It really is bordering on the ridiculous here. In any case, the existence of a fairly new-looking copy of Mein Kampf in a war zone does seem a little too convenient for Israeli propagandists, and Herzog has a history of sharing spurious documents in TV interviews. This is a tweet from Middle East Eye from the 23rd of October. So it says, a document presented by Israeli President Isaac Herzog as proof that Hamas intended to develop chemical weapons is actually an amateur biography of 9/11 attacker Ramzi Youssef and contains no instructions on how to develop chemical weapons. So he's produced some pretty dodgy props before. In response to that tweet, so that tweet's from 3 weeks ago, a prominent Palestinian account shared this again 3 weeks ago, right? So it says this: when will Israel find the Mein Kampf with Hamas fighters? So the answer to Refat's question was that they would find Mein Kampf within 3 weeks. As I say, it's all a little bit too convenient, isn't it? And there's obviously no proof other than just the Israeli president, a very biased person, sort of waving this book, which looks fairly new, you know, in front of the Western press. Now, I wouldn't trust the Israeli president, and I don't think you should either. The next part of his interview with Laura Kuenssberg provides More evidence to that effect. Now, Herzog is asked about reports from the Shifa hospital in northern Gaza.
There are reports there on the ground of babies dying in the neonatal unit after power to their incubators was cut off. You say that Gazans have been told to leave.
That is not true. By the way, it's not true.
Well, we will try through the day.
There is a lot of spin by Hamas. There's a lot of spin by Hamas, but there's electricity in Shifa. Everything is operating. We're speaking to the managers. We haven't gone into Shifa. We're unfortunately underneath Shifa. There's a huge terror base. Actually, the headquarters of Hamas ISIS operations is right there under Shifa. Now, exactly what are we supposed to do? Leave it as is and then in a few years' time go again through the same motion, and you will say it's disproportionate and we will have civilians being killed? So we are calling on all of those uninvolved to go out to another hospital nearby, and we're coordinating it very delicately with all forces around that.
Well, the World Health Organization this morning has said they've lost communications with that hospital, and there are reports from doctors there on the ground about a terrible situation. And our viewers there can see the images from Gaza that many people have not been able to leave. They have not been able to escape. But you mentioned there, President Herzog, what may happen.
So once again, he's saying there are no real problems in Gazan hospitals. The electricity is still working. Babies aren't dying. And even if there were problems, it would all be the fault of Hamas. Now, on the tragic story about the babies, a photo was shared widely on Twitter over the weekend. Rohan Talbot from Medical Aid for Palestinians posted it and said, quote, "Staff at Shifa Hospital have shared this photo of their heroic attempts to keep the premature babies alive in an operating theatre after they were forced to shut down the neonatal ICU." Sukunda Kamani from Channel 4 News also tweeted this, seeming to confirm the story. Just spoke to a senior doctor at Al-Shifa Hospital in Gaza, could hear gunfire in the background whilst he described a horrific scene. More than 30 babies from neonatal unit at major risk taken out of incubators and placed in an operating theatre because barely any electricity. 2 died. Kamani followed that tweet up the next day with this. Just spoke to the same doctor at Al-Shifa. He said a third baby died earlier today and that no one has been evacuated. He said staff wasn't able to access the 300 litres of fuel Israel dropped off as they were too afraid of being shot by Israeli forces to go collect it. So that's a reference to Israel have been putting out this story. You know, if they're struggling with electricity for these premature babies, we'll drop some canisters of fuel outside the hospital. Lots of dispute about how long that fuel could run the hospital for, but as you're hearing here, the doctors are scared to go get it in case they get shot. I personally trust Channel 4 News and Medical Aid for Palestinians a lot more than I do the Israeli president. If you don't know, perhaps you might take the World Health Organization more seriously. Their Director General tweeted this: WHO has managed to get in touch with health professionals at the Al-Shifa Hospital in Gaza. The situation is dire and perilous. It's been 3 days without electricity, without water, and with very poor internet, which has severely impacted our ability to provide essential care. The constant gunfire and bombings in the area have exacerbated the already critical circumstances. Tragically, the number of patient fatalities has increased significantly. Regrettably, the hospital is not functioning as a hospital anymore. The world cannot stand silent while hospitals, which should be safe havens, are transformed into scenes of death, devastation, and despair. Ceasefire. Israel bombards Gaza. The dehumanization of Palestinians is reaching grotesque proportions on both sides of the Atlantic. Have a look at this moment in Florida's House of Representatives.
We are at 10,000 dead Palestinians. How many will be enough? One of my colleagues just said all of them. Wow. One of my colleagues said all of them. One of my colleagues also stated that this is going to dry up their fundraising if we vote on this resolution. I also want that, that's what we've become in this state. That's what we've become in this state, where we don't care about innocent babies that don't even get the opportunity to blow out their first birthday candle.
So she said, how many Gazans have to die? And a state representative, an elected representative, said all of them. All of them. Right? That's a call for the genocide of 2.2 million people, right? It was a Republican called Michelle Saltzman who said that. Now, unlike Rashida Tlaib, so we talked about her on a previous episode, Saltzman has not been censured. So Tlaib said, from the river to the sea, Palestine should be free, or at least she defended or justified other people saying that. And she was censured. She was the third person this century to be censured, which is sort of one step lower than being kicked out of Congress. The only Palestinian American in Congress. She was censured for saying that. Someone in the Florida House of Representatives said that every single Palestinian, 2.2 million of them, should die, and there have been no consequences. Just it's so appalling, right? It also doesn't seem that she is particularly rare when it comes to sort of viewpoints of Republicans. These were moments from the most recent Republican primary debate.
As President of the United States, what would you be urging Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to do at this moment? Governor DeSantis.
I would be telling Bibi, finish the job once and for all with these butchers, Hamas.
The first thing I said to him when it happened was I said, finish them. Finish them.
I would tell him to smoke those terrorists on his southern border, and then I'll tell him as President of the United States, I'll be smoking the terrorists on our southern border.
If you want to stop the 40-plus attacks on military personnel in the Middle East, you have to strike in Iran.
Do you want to bomb Iran?